Potentially, at any time, we could have been, I guess, bombed. At no time was I fearful.
As the war between Israel and Hamas escalates, people from here on the West Coast are returning home and sharing what they have been through. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to West Coast Wrap. I'm Alex Savage. Tonight, President Biden is on his way to Israel, where tomorrow he'll take part in a high-stakes meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This comes as a planned summit with Arab allies has been called off. Meantime, Vice President Kamala Harris is here on the West Coast, weighing in on the war as the administration responds to a blast at a hospital in Gaza that killed at least 500 people. Israel and Hamas each blamed the other for that deadly explosion. While speaking to students at Northern Arizona University today, Vice President Harris said both Israelis and Palestinians deserve peace, self-determination, and safety.
I am deeply affected, as I think we all are, by what we have seen in terms of the loss of life and the violence that has occurred when, first of all, a terrorist organization, Hamas, struck Israel in the way that it did. I think it is important to recognize also the distinction between a terrorist organization, Hamas, and the Palestinian people and civilians, and they should not be conflated.
And as the violence intensifies in the Middle East, a Southern California couple are grateful to be back home tonight. They were visiting Israel when Hamas first launched its deadly attack on that country. Fox 5's Jason Slaw spoke with them about their ordeal to get to safety and why they say they do plan on returning to Israel.
We have to use the experiences for a greater good. We believe that that's the purpose of why we were there.
Patty Kolb and her husband are back home in San Marcos, arriving in San Diego Sunday night after a harrowing trip to Israel. They were there for about a week, visiting friends and touring sites, when everything changed with Hamas's terror attacks.
Potentially, at any time, we could have been, I guess, bombed. At no time was I fearful.
But getting out was not easy. The couple's flight home was canceled, rescheduled, then canceled again. Eventually, they found a Saturday flight from Tel Aviv to Athens.
We spent a lot of time in bomb shelters, including about 15 minutes before we left our Airbnb to go to the airport, and a half an hour before we boarded our plane at the airport.
The couple flew from Athens to Paris to D.C., then home to San Diego.
I know it was a blessing to be home.
Still, she says coming home comes with mixed emotions.
It was a relief, but in some ways, I think we felt a little guilty that we had left. I mean, I'm just being honest with you. You know, not everybody had that opportunity to leave.
Kolb says they are just beginning to process what they've been through.
The brutality, I'm devastated by the pure evil, the demonic attacks. It's unlike anything I've ever witnessed before.
Kolb says they hope to return to Israel for the 11th time as soon as they're able and as soon as it's safe.
This has actually made us fall more in love with Israel. It's made us stand stronger for Israel.
Jason Sloss, Fox 5 News.
And our coverage of West Coast reaction to the war in the Middle East continues online. Just head to westcoastwrap.com for the latest information. We have new information tonight on the discovery of those decaying bodies at a Colorado funeral home. Investigators now say they found the remains of at least 189 people at the Return to Nature funeral home in the town of Penrose. Authorities previously announced they had found 115 bodies at that business, which is south of Colorado Colorado Springs. Now they say the number could still change as work continues to identify the remains. Investigators searched that funeral home 2 weeks ago after neighbors complained about a foul odor in that area. State regulators say the owner tried to conceal improper storage of corpses, claiming he was doing taxidermy. So far, no one has been arrested or charged in the case. A trial for the third police officer charged in Elijah McClain's death began today in Colorado. It's the second of 3 trials tied to McClain's killing, and it comes after jurors delivered a split verdict for 2 other officers last week. On trial now is Aurora officer Nathan Woodyard, who put Elijah McClain in that neck hole that left him temporarily unconscious. Assistant Attorney General Ann Joyce said in opening statements today Woodyard violated department policies on force and de-escalation. The officer was first on scene after a 911 caller reported a suspicious person. McClain was a 23-year-old massage therapist who had been walking home when police confronted him. Officer Woodyard has pleaded not guilty to charges of manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide. In Washington, an audio expert broke down the last known recordings of Manuel Ellis, who died while being restrained by police. David Hallamore was back on the stand today in the ongoing trial of 3 Tacoma police officers charged in Ellis's death. He said he spent hours listening to those recordings, both enhanced through audio software and not enhanced. Today, the jury heard recordings that were not enhanced. Transcripts were provided to the jury, but some words were changed in the document to denote the uncertainty of what was said.
If someone said, "Please, sir," it's a whole lot different than "Breathe, sir." I don't know for sure which one it is.
Tacoma police officers Matthew Collins, Timothy Rankin, and Christopher Burbank are all charged with murder and manslaughter in the death of 33-year-old Manuel Ellis. All 3 of them have pleaded not guilty. Some people believe artificial intelligence is a factor in shocking comments that were phoned in to a recent Beaverton, Oregon City Council meeting. More than a dozen calls came in, disrupting the meeting with racial and gender-related slurs. Fox 12's Carly Olson spoke to Beaverton's mayor about why she believes AI bots made those calls.
We had probably closer to 11 to 15 callers calling in, and some of them were calling back in like a second time.
During the October 3rd Beaverton City Council meeting, audience members were shocked to hear calls like this during public comment.
So I just wanted to say all your names are on a list, and the race war is coming soon. You.
Thank you.
This council is going to flood this town with 1,000 a week.
Okay, thank you.
Slurs against women and various ethnicities.
To have our children groomed by homosexual Jews.
Okay.
To have our women raped.
Please cut them off too.
Mayor Lacey Beatty shut down the comments and dismissed staff members from the audience, but she says it wasn't long before she noticed something odd about the calls.
Some of them were sped up 2 or 3 times the speed. Some of it was definitely automated, and so you could hear that it was not a normal voice. You know, they all started the same way. Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, can you hear me?
Beatty believes they might have been AI bots set up to disrupt the meeting and cause an extreme reaction. And it wasn't the only time this has happened.
I've talked to mayors across the country. There's other cities that are experiencing this. I know that cities with Jewish mayors are being particularly targeted. I am not of the Jewish faith. But we know it's a lot of cities where women are the mayors too.
Beatty says at Tuesday night's council meeting and others in the future, she will handle it in a similar way.
Public participation in meetings is quintessential for government to do its work. I'm not going to allow a few bad actors to stop us from doing something that's so fundamentally important to the work we do.
Carly Olson, Fox 12 Oregon.
Coming up tonight, actor Alec Baldwin facing new legal troubles over that deadly shooting on a New Mexico movie set. Coming up, our legal analyst explains why prosecutors are now seeking charges against him. And we'll also break down why scientists are concerned about what they see happening on Mount Rainier.
And record-breaking heat for some across the West. I'll have a look at what is expected for the coming days coming up.
Prosecutors in New Mexico say they are seeking to recharge actor Alec Baldwin for that deadly shooting on the movie set in 2021. An involuntary manslaughter charge against Baldwin was dropped back in April in the death of cinematographer Helena Hutchins. Baldwin has said he pulled back the hammer on that gun, but not the trigger. Forensic experts were hired to review the evidence. Prosecutors said the experts say the trigger had to be pulled for the gun to fire. Our legal analyst says reopening this case raises a lot of questions.
Why weren't they more careful? Why didn't they vet the case more properly back when they should have? Why didn't they talk to a number of forensic gun experts to find out if that weapon was fireable, inoperable, whatever it was? Get all your ducks in a row and then make a decision.
Prosecutors say they will present that evidence to a grand jury within the next 2 months. NFL Hall of Famer and former 49er Terell Owens was hit by a car last night after getting into an argument while playing pickup basketball. Owens was in Calabasas near Los Angeles when he apparently got into a confrontation with another player on the court. After the game, authorities say that player drove his vehicle into Owens' knee. Police were called to the scene, but Owens did not require medical attention, and so far, no arrests have been made. Some major airlines are complaining about a small upstart air carrier they say is not required to follow the same security rules. JXS flies to 5 West Coast states, including California, Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, and New Mexico. There is private security for JXS customers, but they don't have to pass through any TSA checkpoints. KTVU's Tom Vakar reports the FAA is now considering whether to make the airline adhere to commercial airline requirements.
JXS Airlines is what's called a public charter air operator, a kind of hop-on jet service that allows it to fly planes up to 30 seats in and out of their own private terminals at many U.S. airports, big and small. Such operators meet decades-old federal operations safety and security regulations that apply to them.
The FAA even clarified themselves that they could not find any statistical evidence to support the idea that there was any threat or any risk involved.
It has flight attendants, power to every row of seats, free Wi-Fi, as well as snacks. Your checked bags are handed to you as you come off the aircraft, no waiting at carousels. Like 50-plus other such airlines, they're growing in popularity. JXS passenger Alan Scott uses JXS between the Bay Area, Los Angeles, and Las Vegas, where he does a lot of business.
The benefit is really time. You know, you can get here 20 minutes before the flight takes off, and it's easy to get off the plane.
Alex Holmes used to fly Southwest.
They're a very good airline. I've been very happy with them. It's great. I've been able to show up about 10 minutes before a flight and be able to go right on.
Since JXS and other similar operators are charter operators, the rules from security to crew flight hours are different than those imposed on major carriers such as American, Delta, Southwest, and others. Now, major carriers citing safety concerns are urging the Federal Aviation Administration to consider changes for these small carriers, which could wipe them out as competitors. But more than 70,000 passengers and supporters have already written to the FAA to leave these airlines be.
Instead of, trying to go after JXS, maybe they ought to consider, going in the same business.
There's nothing stopping these carriers from starting an operation similar to ours.
These carriers often fly into smaller airports long abandoned by big commercial airlines. JXS cites Concord's Buchanan Field, where it now flies.
It was the first flight to touch down in that airport after 24 years.
And so, JXS says it's backed by United, JetBlue, and Qatar Airways, passing all of their rigid safety audits. Tom Vakar, KTVU, Fox 2 News.
Well, the weather picture across the West is wide-ranging, to say the least. These are live EarthCam images tonight from downtown Seattle showing rain that has returned to the Pacific Northwest. You can probably see from that shot the roadways are wet as drivers make their way around the city tonight. Many people in this area welcoming the showers after a relatively dry spring, summer, and early fall in the Pacific Northwest. A much different pattern, though, is taking hold as you head south. People visiting fall pumpkin patches in Gilbert, Arizona this week, facing temperatures topping 100 degrees. A much different scene there. Let's bring in KTVU meteorologist Rosemary Orozco, tracking conditions all across the West. A very different picture depending on which direction you head.
You said it, Alex. No sign of fall over areas of Arizona or even parts of the West. Take a look at some of the afternoon highs from today. Las Vegas coming in at the low 90s, Palm Springs and areas over Phoenix hitting 100-degree plus. We have Los Angeles coming in at 84. And today was kind of the kickoff of a heat wave. It's going to be a mini heat wave, but it's going to be there as this ridge of high pressure continues to strengthen over the West into the coming days. And with that said, the number of days Phoenix has hit 100 or above this year, 128. Now, the average is 111, a record set back in 2020, 145 days. But I do not see much relief for Phoenix coming this entire week. We may see just a drop in temperatures on Sunday. And right now, next week looks to be a lot better for the Arizona area. Meanwhile, we have this ridge here that has pushed that rain line all the way to the north. So even though we had some rain over the Pacific Northwest, including Seattle today, we will be drying out for Wednesday over this section of the country. Meanwhile, the heat will be on over parts of California with the heat advisory for parts of the Bay Area as well as the Los Angeles area. Some of the hotter spots are expected to reach into the low 90s for tomorrow, in addition to along the coastline, high surf expected. So we have some nice beach weather coming to parts of the west coast of California. Unfortunately, now we're looking at that possibility of sneaker waves as well as high surf and rip currents to go along with it over the next few days. And we mentioned a moment ago, the Arizona area expected to remain very, very hot. As we move through Wednesday, Thursday, temperatures do begin to peak on Thursday. By Friday, we begin to see a bit of a change with fall-like weather returning to the Pacific Northwest as well as California for tomorrow. Here's another look at Seattle today. The high 62 degrees. And as we slip into the next 3 days, you will notice areas over Seattle going to see a nice hiatus from the rain, and temperatures expected to be 70 degrees for tomorrow. A tad cooler on Thursday, and then a return to the cloudier, unsettled weather coming in on Friday for areas over the Pacific Northwest. Same goes for the California area. San Francisco tomorrow, upper 70s, mid 80s on Thursday, upper 60s on Friday. So it will be short-lived, but it's going to be hot over the next couple of days. Alex?
Yeah, our friends in Arizona can't shake that heat. All right, Rosemary, thank you. A police canine in Las Vegas is recovering tonight after being stabbed by a burglary suspect who was trying to avoid arrest. Las Vegas police responded to a break-in yesterday. Officers say the suspect refused to comply with commands, so the canine was released. Police say that's when the suspect stabbed the canine. Officers eventually were able to take that suspect into custody. Federal regulators have now launched an investigation into the San Francisco-based self-driving vehicle company Cruise. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration says it's looking into whether the company is doing enough to protect pedestrians. This comes in response to 2 reports from the company about pedestrians being injured, including one in which a human driver hit a pedestrian first and knocked that person into the path of a Cruise car. In a statement, a Cruise spokesperson said, quote, Cruise communicates regularly with NHTSA and has consistently cooperated with each of the agency's requests for information, whether associated with an investigation or not, and we plan to continue doing so. The company also said the agency has not asked for any more information from Cruise on the cases being investigated. It's an ominous sign on Mount Rainier. Coming up tonight, what scientists are noticing and why it could mean trouble for wildlife. Also, we'll show you the rescue of hikers who got lost in the woods in Oregon. Washington-based T-Mobile is making a major change to its rate plans. The cell phone carrier is informing some of its users they will automatically move to more expensive rate plans unless they opt out. Those moving to a new plan will usually pay $5 more a month per line for that new service. The affected older rate plans include T-Mobile One, Magenta, Magenta 55, and Simple Select Choice. Many users will be switched to a variety of the carrier's Go 5G plans. Those start at $75 a month per phone line, with taxes and fees included. Scientists have noticed a problem on Washington's Mount Rainier. They say glacial ice on the mountain is melting at a rapid pace. Fox 13 meteorologist Abby Akoni shows us what they're doing to understand the scope of this problem and the impact it's having on the ecosystem.
It's the snow on Mount Rainier that makes the volcano stand out from far distances. But now some are noticing that the mountain is gradually losing snow.
When we come up, we look at the glaciers. You can tell that they're retreating.
Here's one example of how the mountain is changing. The Nisqually Glacier right behind me retreating on average 3 feet every 10 days. And geologists say this is a concerning and dramatic pace.
Well, it does seem to be getting farther and farther up the mountainside each year that we come.
There are places that I've been as an adult, and they just look different, you know, because the glaciers have just gone.
Glaciers on Mount Rainier provide crucial water resources to the region. A certain amount of snow is expected to melt from the glaciers every summer, and this benefits fish and salmon species by keeping the water temperatures of rivers and streams cool. But too much melting over the last century has meant that some glaciers are gone, which in turn could harm fish.
Fish that are adapted specially to those environments, to that cold water, can no longer survive because the water is getting much warmer.
Scott Beeson has worked as a geologist for the National Park Service at Mount Rainier for more than a decade. Recent data, including one of his studies, have found that 3 of Rainier's 29 named glaciers have disappeared altogether. Beeson's research focuses on how glacial melt makes the landscape vulnerable to debris flows.
As the glacier is like a block that's putting weight and pressure on the rock that's sitting there. As that glacier retreats, all of a sudden that barrier is gone.
Beeson says that glaciers store up water and sediment, so when they melt, all that loose material can pile up.
Silt, sand, rocks, from small little fist-sized boulders to huge boulders the size of a car can be picked up and carried downstream.
These debris flows can be destructive to trees and old-growth forests, yet another key part of Rainier's ecosystem. This can harm important bird species and others and destroy habitats. Beeson says the National Park Service at Rainier is now trying a new system that can detect these flows more quickly.
We're working on improving forecasting models to detect debris flows, or to forecast for debris flows.
Well, the purpose of Beeson's research wasn't to determine the exact relationship between climate and melting glaciers. He says a lot of the melting has happened while climate change has gotten underway.
They're all what we would expect to see with human-induced or anthropogenic climate change.
Beeson says that cutting carbon emissions could help.
I think we can look at the amount of carbon that we emit. We can look and see if we're driving unnecessarily or if there's things that we can do to reduce the amount of carbon that's being introduced into the atmosphere.
And that was Fox 13 meteorologist Abby Akoni reporting for us tonight. Beeson says he's been asking about putting tarps over Rainier's glaciers to prevent them from melting. Switzerland has tried something similar over one of its glaciers, although he understands carbon emissions from making and deploying those tarps would be significant. Tonight, we are seeing for the first time dramatic video that shows the rescue of 2 women who got lost while hiking in Oregon. This happened on Mount Hood back on October 2nd. The women were trying to reach Ramona Falls and didn't have a compass or a map in the dark. The 2 called for help, eventually being found by a Clackamas County search and rescue trail runner who gave them dry clothes to help warm up.
Having gotten lost or even staying out long, if they had a way to see at night, then they would have been able to get themselves out after dark.
The search and rescue expert stresses the importance of bringing emergency supplies whenever you go on.